Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for yet another coaching call with Needle Marketing. We do this every Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Pacific, 1:30 p.m. Eastern. Really happy to have Sally. And Sally, how do I see your last name?
I'm a guy.
I'm a guy. Sally, I'm a guy here with Creative Minds Montessori. Sally, thank you so much for being here.
I'm really excited. So thank you for, letting me do this.
Absolutely. If you don't mind me asking, what compelled you to volunteer for the hot seat? Because that's
I really wanted an honest critique of the website, and in my small little community, everybody loves us, so they are not necessarily pointing out what we could do.
Sure.
We only know what we're doing, but we don't know what's out there. So, and I know we have a huge need for I know I'm missing opportunities too by even my call to action. I probably should have candidly in there or some kind of way where the interested parties can make their own appointments. So that whole part I'm ready to kind of launch into. And so that's why I've been watching these needle marketing workshops or meetings.
Awesome. Well, we're thrilled to have you and appreciate you being here. My intention here today, the goal of this call would be for us to script your admissions process in a way that's scalable, and then to do what we can to, I don't want to say automate because not everything's automatable, but we'll say maybe systemize, because I think that's when things are allowed to scale more or less. And so, hopefully we can do that together. And then for our listeners, I'm hoping that this gives you the opportunity to do the same thing. So when you're watching me and Sally go through and kind of build the admissions process for her school, that will give you a template, so to speak, to kind of follow and do it at your school. And what's interesting about these types of processes is even though they live inside of our head, it's really hard to optimize a process until it's out on paper. It's hard to figure out what's working, what's not working, and where margin exists. And so once we get it onto paper, proverbially speaking, I don't actually use paper anymore, but we'll get it digitally constructed, then I think we're going to be able to make some improvements. Does that sound like a good plan?
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. So Sally, you were telling me a little bit about some of your background with StoryBrand and Don Miller. Would you mind sharing that with our viewers?
Right. When I got ready to update our website, I really didn't know what to do. So I looked into Wix and some other things, and it was really a blank screen standing in front of me, and I couldn't make any forward motion. So I ran across Don Miller and StoryBrand, listened to the whole thing, and it really made sense to me because just like we're the guides in the classroom, we want to be also the guides with the parents. And so I saw that this was really crystallized what I could do that would maybe differentiate us from other schools. And then the website came together as quickly as it could when I teach full time, but it really helped me pinpoint what I needed to do. And then it's also led me to believe how much more I have to do, right?
Sure.
It's just the beginning, but I found Don Miller's whole narrative just really called to me, and it was a big help.
That's great. And context for everybody who's listening, if you haven't taken it yet, we actually have a coaching call specifically on Don Miller's StoryBrand. And it comes from a StoryBrand certified guide. So there's a lot of noise out there, but what's nice about this particular coaching call is it's built specifically for Montessorians, and it's from a StoryBrand guide, and you'll find that in our members area, and it's available to everybody regardless of plane. So if you just go to our coaching calls section, which if you're logged in as a member, it's the live coaching, then you can watch that call, which I think has been really valuable. And I love, Sally, that you just found it on your own. Like, that's so proactive and impressive. Great job. And Heidi just asked, is the main topic website or admissions process? We're going to talk about the admissions process predominantly, but the website will obviously tie into that just because of how important it is to the whole admissions process. Speaking of, I'd like to go ahead and share your website if you don't mind, Sally.
Oh, please do.
Awesome. So I think you've done just an excellent job here. I really love your use of imagery. Note for everybody is the images that we see most effective in digital advertising tend to be children at work. That's what people resonate with. So a lot of times, for whatever reason, and I don't know why this has become the industry standard, but in all childcare websites, you always see kids spiking the camera smiling, which is fine. But those kind of like posy pictures aren't what catalyze parents to action. Parents like seeing their children doing something. And I think there's sort of empathic reasoning where it's like, oh, I can see my kid doing that. And so you've got those images here, which I think are just excellent. I also love this tagline. Did you come up with that? This is.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I kind of felt that was our main, that what differentiated us from the big boxes and the public schools. That because they're into our preschool in our area now too, so their competition's really fierce.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is really, I think, important for the admissions process, because what you're doing here is right out of the gate, I land on your website and you're telling me more or less what it is that you want me to do. So we're accepting applications for September 2020. And then I've got a schedule a tour button here, and it's nice and bright, and you've used the isolation effect. And I think that, did you say you got this from the call with Heidi?
I think well, I didn't see that with Emily, I think. When you,
with
brought
Emily,
it
yes.
first. Right.
Awesome.
So it's always was there, but it was white, and it just made sense when you said to highlight it.
That's fantastic. So one of the things I'd like to do is let's hop over into this. I've got this little system pulled up specifically for Creative Minds. And what I want to do, where did it go? Pipelines. I want to build your pipeline with you.
Oh,
so,
great.
Let's start with the very first step. I tend to think of this as new parent inquiry. Now, this actually predates tour. And so what you have here, which is great, is the opportunity to schedule a tour. But what I'd like to start with is a parent that has a question or has downloaded information. So they've downloaded a white paper or downloaded tuition or taken a quiz, or they've done something that we consider to be closer to the top of the funnel. And we don't have to call this a new parent inquiry. We can call it whatever we want, but that's what I consider to be stage one of the admissions pipeline. But I also don't want to over-insert myself into your process. So I just want to make sure that you're comfortable with that.
No, actually right now, all we do is people call us, and I know we have a need for an admissions funnel. And, but I actually haven't had any time. That's what the part I found overwhelming is, where do you have time to even write papers and get this stuff together when you're teaching and running a school?
Right. So here's one of the benefits of doing the hot seat. And I want everybody to know this, all of our live attendees, if you volunteer for a hot seat, you get a bunch of free stuff. So the first free thing that we're going to give you, Sally, is you get to pick a white paper. And
oh, thank you.
We're going to gift that to you from Needle Marketing. So let's hop into our resources section real quick. We have to have top of the funnel content. And if you don't mind me, I'm just going to go off on a tangent briefly, but it's a really important one. 98% of your traffic is not ready to engage with you in any way at the bottom of the funnel. So all of our websites say, call us, schedule a tour, contact us, ask a question, reach out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And statistically, only 2% of those people at best are the industry standard conversion rate is 0.5% to 2%. So at best, 2% of those people are going to do those things. 98% of people are not going to do any of those things. But if you give them other opportunities, take this quiz, is Montessori right for your child? Or download this white paper, 6 reasons Montessori will work for your child. Or download our tuition rates, which tends to be closer to the middle of the funnel. Those things allow people the opportunity to engage earlier, which increases your ability to engage with those parents, and then gives you the opportunity to follow up with them with an email nurture. So the first thing we're going to do is let's pick a lead magnet for you. The most popular is the 6 reasons Montessori will work for your child. I think followed with Montessori versus traditional school, what's the difference? And you don't necessarily have to pick right now today. Maybe we could pick
right.
a older. But if there's one that appeals to you, what I'd like to do is just have a lead magnet sort of in the queue.
Yeah, I think the 6 reasons Montessori will work. I like that one.
That's excellent. So I'm going to download this now and pulling up a little email so I can share everything with you after the fact. And I can help you load all of this onto your site so that you have it.
Okay.
So here's what we did is this new parent inquiry is going to include anybody who contacts. So if they fill out the contact form, they should go into our new parent inquiry in theory. Anybody who calls and asks a question, and anybody who engages with you using top of the funnel content like the white paper. Now, once somebody has landed here, we need to nurture them. And this is a really difficult thing to do if you're doing it by hand, because you have, so many things to do, and everybody's wearing multiple hats. So one of the issues that I'd like to help resolve here is an email nurture. And that's also something that I'm going to gift you with. So let's go to our, where did it go? Oh, I'm in the wrong. I'm just not smart. We're gonna go
So
to
can I ask a question?
yes, ma'am,
So
please.
if I have something on Facebook, I could put my own white paper on there, or I have them reference and they would fall into this funnel?
Yes, that's the ideal scenario. Is you're using it actively yourself. So you're posting something on Facebook, and oh, by the way, if you're interested in the 6 reasons that Montessori will work for your child, and now there's just all roads kind of lead to this bottleneck, if you will, that allows you the opportunity to start aggregating this parent contact information.
Okay.
So it's in the marketer's world, we call this list building. I don't use those terms often because they tend to repel Montessorians. They don't like the idea of commoditizing parents that way. But technically speaking, we're building a list of prospects that we can then communicate with. And what people tend maybe not to resonate with as much is the fact that if somebody gives you their email, they're giving you permission to use it. And then if they opt out of your emails, that's not an insult at all. It just means that they're no longer potentially interested. And so that's okay too. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you this Montessori email nurture template.
Thank you.
And what the email nurture template, and I'll pull it up for our viewers. It's 7 emails, I think. Yeah, 7 emails. And the reason we did this is statistically 80% of all your conversions are going to happen after the 8th touch point. So the theory here is you do 7 emails, and after the 7th email, you call them. And this is templated information, and you can fill in the blanks. So welcome to school name. Hi, my name is blank. And you give them some context about you. But what you're doing throughout the entire Nurture series, and you'll notice that we've got links to articles, and then opportunities to schedule a tour. You're establishing yourself as an authority and providing value to prospects in a way that takes you out of the I'm a vendor paradigm and puts you in the I'm a thought leader paradigm. And so we just, I think, kind of established the beginning process for new parent inquiry.
And then what's the timing frame that you recommend for, so they're not getting all of these at once, but they, do you do it once a week with these 7 or maybe twice a week?
It's a brilliant question. I think it depends on how aggressive your admissions process tends to be. If you're in a hyper competitive area where that they're getting rained on by everybody under the sun and parents are looking at a lot of options, I would put them closer together as often as once every couple of days. Okay. If your admissions process ends up being a little bit longer and parents take time, then you could do it once a week. I don't know that I would do it any further apart than once a week, because if somebody just downloaded information, they're in a purchasing cycle, and you don't want to be so far apart that you kind of miss the golden window.
Right. Okay.
Oh, and Heidi just chatted in. This is really nice with emphasis on unique. Also impressed you lead with year-round and extended care offerings. Oh, Heidi's mentioning your
Oh, thank you.
website.
Yeah.
Excellent. Great feedback, Heidi. Thank you. That's really awesome. There we go. Just making sure that I can see the chats. Okay, so we've got our very first step in the admissions pipeline. And if you're following along, pull up a Word document and start mapping out your own. It's okay if they're just bullet points. What you want is a bullet point, and then nested underneath that are the things that happen. So what we just did for Sally is we've got our bullet point for new parent inquiry, and we know who goes into new parent inquiry. So it's anybody who fills out a contact form, anybody who calls in, anybody who downloads a lead magnet, and then we know what happens to them. They receive our email nurture. So the note here, Sally, is that if anybody calls you, you want to just ask a few upfront questions. And there are really nice ways to ask some of these that don't feel like you're soliciting information. So one of the things that I like to say is, hey, by the way, we prepared an email series specifically for new parents to introduce them to Montessori. If it's okay with you, I can have that sent to you. Are you interested? And then they get to say no. But if they say yes, it's way better than saying, can I have your email address?
Right. Because
can I have your email address is an ask. But I prepared a new series that teaches you everything you need to know about Montessori. Are you interested? That's a give. And then you get to manually add them to that process. And I actually have an idea for how we're going to do this for you long term. So I'm going to wrap new parent inquiry for now. Is that acceptable? And then we'll move on to the next step.
No, I think it's covered quite a bit. I mean, I don't even know where to start there.
And I'm going to help with that too. So I'm hoping that we're actually able to build some of this together on this call. Fingers crossed. And if we're not, then maybe I'll connect with you after and we'll make sure that I won't leave you in the lurch, I promise. So the very next thing, in my opinion, for Montessori schools is schedule a tour. And there are some schools that have a preface to this. Some schools require, like I remember Matt used to require an in-house meeting, especially for his infant families at Bergamo. Some schools require, you know, a phone call. I'm curious though, and the reason I'm jumping to this without hesitation is that you have schedule a tour as your primary call to action. So it feels like that's your next step too.
Right. I prefer them to meet us to get an idea. I'm the kind that'll recommend a different kind of school if I think it's a better fit. But I like them here. I like them to see the children working. And I like to just make that eye contact and that one-to-one. We're a really small school, so it's kind of easy to fit that into that personalized fit we like to be.
I love that you just said that. I'm the type that would recommend a different school if they're a better fit. That's so high integrity, and I think parents really appreciate that type of approach. And I imagine it probably brings people back around to you. You know, then they can say, "Well, wait a minute." Yeah, that's so interesting. We would call that negative selling, but I realize for you, it's not a tactic. It's just you being honest.
Well, you know, if you don't have a good fit, it just brings everything down, makes work harder in the classroom and outside.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So for our next stage, we're going to have tours scheduled. Now, this is interesting. A lot of schools treat tour as its own phase. The issue that I see with that is there's a gap typically between when they've scheduled their tour and when they've taken their tour. So I view those as two independent phases. And one of the things that schools do incorrectly is you're talking to parents, you're engaging with them, and you're answering questions, and you're really there. And then they schedule a tour, and then we just go away. And then they don't hear from us again until the tour is back on. And that gap is actually, there's something about that that's sort of like catastrophic to my psyche. Because, you know, just a minute ago, we were really close friends, and we were talking, and then I did the thing that you asked me to do, and now you disappeared. And it feels very transactional. So,
and I think it also gives, excuse me for interrupting, it also gives them an opportunity to check out other places or other schools to creep in there.
Absolutely.
Nurturing them more into the kind of dialogue we want to have.
There's an amount of what I would call buyer's remorse. Anytime anybody takes an action step towards a purchase, exactly what you just said, you're now also, there's a little red flag in their mind going, well, wait a minute, how far do I want to go this rabbit hole without having alternatives and knowing what's going on? And so it's important to continue to nurture that relationship, but also to reinforce the decision they just made. And so when somebody scheduled a tour, what I'd love to see is a pre-tour nurture. And there's a couple things you can do here, and they're all really exciting. So I'm about to nerd out here for just a minute. One of the things that I'd love to see is we have a school comparison checklist that we just launched. Pardon me. It's awesome. So you could send people this school comparison checklist, and assuming that you want to, of course, but what's nice about it is you get to say, hey, look, we know you're shopping around. It's the absolute right thing to do. We actually prefer it because anytime you compare us to any other school, you're going to see the miracle that is Montessori. However, we just want to make sure you're comparing apples to apples. So we created this really easy to use checklist here. And what I would do is I would have this change. So where school #1 is actually your logo, and then you put a great big green check mark in every single one of the first boxes. That way there's this kind of visual differentiation. And then the idea would be that they print this out, and now they get to go in and take notes around all the schools and then compare your school to their school.
And we're leading them down the pathway of what, right.
So I'm going to share the school comparison checklist with you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Adding it to the list. And then the other thing, do I have that in here? Where did I put that? Pre-tour questions for parents. So we have 5 questions, and they're psychologically geared. And I explained in this article why we ask the questions we ask. So when they schedule a tour, I send them an email saying, thank you so much. We can't wait to see you. In order for us to customize the tour to your specific needs and to maximize the value of your time, would you mind asking me these 5 questions, or answering these 5 questions? And the first question is, if you don't mind telling us in a few sentences, what's most important to you in a school? And this is open by design. You actually want them to begin answering without any prompting. Again, feel free to wordsmith any of this the way that you'd like. Number 2 is every family is unique. Do you have any specific concerns or fears that I can help you address? The word fear is strong and it's used by intention. Every parent's worried about something. And most parents are afraid that their fear is unique. They're actually afraid to bring it up, is my experience. My experience as a parent, actually. And so you allowing them the space to speak this into the process gives you the ability to kind of bring it out into the fold. So one of the big fears that I had when when we were touring is I looked around at this beautiful, serene environment and self-directed education. I'm thinking about my little 3-year-old tyrant who I'm in my mind, I'm like, there's no way. Like
We get that a lot, actually. He can never do it, you know?
yeah, I was just like, my child is going to come in here and destroy, you know what I mean? Like glass at arm's length. Are you kidding? Like,
Right.
yeah, all I saw was like blood and tears at the end of the day. And it was an important thing for me to get over just for myself. And, you know, of course my son thrives, and we got to go to student as a teacher just the other day, and I'm watching him take something off the shelf, and you know, it's like all these little breakable things filled with water, and I'm just in awe at the fact that he's just so adept at all of those. But parents need that coaching, that hey, it's okay to bring these things up. So I like that as question number 2. Question number 3 is trying to find the perfect school for your child can be daunting. What criteria will you use to make the decision? This is important because you need them to narrow their goals.
Yeah.
Everybody wants everything. I want it to be cheap. I want it to be perfect. I want it to be clean. I want it to be safe. I want it to be right next door. I want you to be open. Whatever, you know, like all these things. And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to make sure that they're giving you reasonable expectations too, because when people have to list that, if it's not just in their head, then they tend to be a little bit more reasonable than they would if they're just being themselves. And this also allows you to follow up with really solid pieces of content, which we have. Question number 4 is, we know we have a lot of options. What specifically attracted you to our school? What's interesting about this is you're actually not prompting them for answers as much as you're getting them to restate and revalidate their decision. So what's nice about this answer is all they're doing is reselling themselves, because when somebody's made a decision, they want to not feel stupid. So they're going to come in and say, oh, well, we loved all these things. And then number 5 is, do you have any specific goals for your child? And this allows you, I think, to customize the tour schedule. Now, you don't have to use all of these questions by any means. They're just ideas. But what's nice is...
a lot of these we do. This is what we do. And I think it's better to actually do it beforehand, because like you said, it crystallizes it for them. And then it makes a more meaningful dialogue.
Yes, ma'am. Well, and if they are scheduling tours at other schools, I'll tell you what everybody else does is they schedule a tour and they go away. And then they just show up at the tour and it's like, all right, well, here we are. And then now the poor person who's managing that tour is trying to build a relationship, trying to ask all these questions, trying to glean all this information, and then trying to customize the tour on the fly, as opposed to you who's asked these questions on the front end. And now you have all this excellent context. And you get to come in and you say, hey, Kasim, I know that you said you were worried about your son. Let me tell you a story. Which, by the way, going back to Don Miller, it's the best way to connect with people, period. All 5 of these questions can lead you to telling them a story. And because everybody's been doing this for so long, all of our Montessorians have such amazing background and information, you get to tell them a story. Let me tell you about little Donnie, or maybe we don't use names, but let me tell you about a child that was here 2 years ago who, you know, I mean, they said he had extreme attention deficit. He was having trouble buckling down. His parents were really worried. And let me tell you about the experience he's had now. And that's what parents need to hear. That's what I needed to hear. You just want to know that that's possible. So I'm going to share this template with you. Let me download it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and it helps them, like on the Tuesday call, visualize their child in the environment.
Yes, that's what a really good point. That's another thing that I wanted to mention too, is for them, one of the things that we talked about with Lise, who gave a really great talk on Tuesday, by the way. If you didn't see it, it's worth viewing the recording. She runs a school, Chesterfield Montessori, and they're just rock stars. Their processes are amazing. And we were talking about the trepidation parents feel when they're touring. And if you can give them the ability to visualize the process up front, it can be really helpful. So one of the things that we recommend is to go out there with your iPhone and just say, you know, hey, this is Sally. I'm here to just introduce, you know, our school. I'm with Creative Minds Montessori. This is our school. And then it sounds really stupid maybe, but you want to tell them, here's where you park. Here's the door that you enter. You're going to be meeting with me. And what you're doing is you're breaking down all those subconscious psychological barriers that people have to anything new, period. because we have 2 trillion years of evolution built into our psyche that makes anything new terrify all of our senses. And so if they've seen the school, seen the parking lot, know exactly where they're going to park, where they're going to go in, understand the entire process. And then what's really nice is they've seen your face, they've heard your voice. And so all those barriers on the front end, they actually walk in. And I see this now because I've been doing these coaching calls so often. Anytime I meet with a new Montessori school, they kind of already know me. Like, it's really weird. Like, you get on the phone and they sort of address me like we're friends. And in the beginning, it's a little jarring because you're like, I don't know who this, and you actually, I feel bad. I'm like, oh my goodness, have I met you before? And should I know who you are? But they're just so much more comfortable because they've seen you, which makes all the sense in the world. So if you have the opportunity to do that, it could go out right into that pre-tour email. The pre-tour email could say, hey, here's everything you need to know in a video. And then, by the way, if you don't mind filling out this pre-tour questionnaire. And now we've done a lot of relationship building. And I think that's the tour scheduled pending stage.
Yeah.
I've realized that I'm kind of maybe overwhelming the process here. Sally, how have I done with these 2 phases?
I really, because I've been following, you had a series 2 on sales funnel, the funnel, and with Don Miller, it's exactly, I'm right up there with you. I get it. And it's perfect. I really think this scheduling, the tour scheduling, breaking up into 2 makes so much sense.
Excellent. So we've got our first phase, our second phase. The third phase is the tour is complete. So they came in, they took obviously actually the third phase is the tour, but what's interesting about that is that process happens manually. So I don't think it's necessarily in this pipeline script because this is what's happening on an automated basis. One thing I will say to all of our members, though, is make sure that you have a process for your tour. This is so critical. Don't wing it. I don't care how good you are at things. You need to know what room you're going to go in first and why, what time you're going to enter that room. You need to know the cadence that you're walking people through because you're telling a story. I actually think that you need to know where you end and where you sit. And I don't view those things as manipulative at all. I just think all you're doing is making the process seamless for the parent. That's my soft opinion. I'd actually be really open to you challenging me on that, Sally. Does that sound feasible?
Well, it would be very hard in our school. We have 1 room.
Okay.
So I can bring them in the door and no, we have actually, because of the parents are their fear here is people in the classroom, that we actually have them just observe the observation window. It's like 4 by 6 and they can see the whole classroom. And so while we're talking, they're watching the classroom. And it's not the most effective, but we do know a good place to sit them at certain times, depending who's in the classroom. But we just have that one. And so they're in the office talking to us. Usually I'm in the classroom when they come, and who's ever in the office will, chat with them a little bit, make them feel comfortable, and then they'll watching the classroom. Then I'll go in and we'll talk more specific about their needs for their family.
That's great. And the person who's chatting with them, if they had that pre-tour survey handy,
right,
parents already filled it out and you've had a conversation about it prior to, and now they have these talking points. And, it's really, I think, easy to get people to open up once you know what it is that they're interested in or afraid of. And what's interesting about human communication is we're so much more likely to talk into a form than we are to talk directly to a person in some instances. It sterilizes conversation a lot, but then there's things where people would just, bare their heart and soul into this survey. And then when they get into the classroom, they might hold their cards to their chest a little bit closer than usual. So you might get more out of them.
I think a lot of times they forget kind of what they want to ask. That they get in there and then you start down a pathway and then their major questions, they call later, or they've just literally forgotten the things that they wanted to ask.
I absolutely agree with you. I still do that sometimes. It's always like, gosh, I had so many questions before I got into here and now I don't know where to head. That's another piece for the tour is you want to know exactly what you want the parents to do and you want to tell them, is my soft opinion. So when and this drives into our tour complete. When somebody takes a tour, it should end with a distinct call to action. So it would be, Sally, hey, thank you so much for coming. I think that we'd be a perfect fit. I think your child would really thrive here. I'd love to see you at our school. Here's our admissions packet. Go home, take a look at it. Let me know if you have any questions. And, maybe that's the approach, maybe it's not, but whatever it is, it should be specific. Oftentimes what we do, and I still do this in my business, and I'm really bad at this part. But sometimes what we do, it's like, all right, thanks for coming. Let Let me know what you think. Like, just very, very open-ended. And what's interesting is people all have the same insecurities. And so they actually kind of want to know that you feel that this is the right fit, and you feel, and like you said, I'll let people know if they're not, which is great, because that's a distinct call to action another way. Hey, this might not be the right fit because, but there's this really phenomenal preschool right down the road, and they might be a better fit for your, et cetera. But to all of our live listeners, because it sounds like you already have this figured out really well, Sally, know what happens after the tour and tell them this is the next step, because people need that hand holding. So for the tour complete, the automation there is we have a post-tour survey, and the post-tour survey isn't quite as, it's not quite as specific. Let me see if I can find it real quick. It's an email, our post-tour follow-up. And the email says, now that you've taken the tour, I'd love to hear your feedback. How was your experience? Were your questions answered and concerns addressed? Was there anything we could have done better? And this is meant to get them to kind of respond, and hopefully respond in their own way. So we don't want to be too directive, because we don't know what we don't know in the post-tour, but we definitely want them to talk to us. Right. So hopefully at the tour, they've been given the thing that's the next thing to do, and then we follow up with the post-tour survey. Would this align with your process? Is this something that you would use?
I think it would. We always send a follow-up email thanking them for their time, but I do like this because it's more back and forth. We're asking, like what we can do. It's not just like thank you and we're just talking at them. I also include the little movie Building a Pink Tower. It's on YouTube, and so I usually put a link to that because they talk about Montessori. It was the movie that they made. I can't remember the name of the movie but it's a nice little YouTube video. It's about 3 minutes. And it's beautifully done about how Montessori really works for all the children. And they talk about, people can look into it, but I found it's kind of a nice little way to, that one, the 348 building, the one below.
Oh, this one, Building the Pink Tower, there it is.
I don't know, yeah, I think that might be it.
I will link to this.
That's not, that's not it.
Oh, here's one, 535.
That's it, right.
Okay, I'm gonna link to this in the description of this video so everybody has it.
Yeah, I really like it. It kind of is a nice way to give an overview. And it's so, you've been saying this, but here's another authority that's kind of backing up what you're saying.
And what you just said made me so excited and happy. From a sales perspective, and I hate to use that word, but I'm gonna use it anyway. From a sales perspective, it's so important to be the source of the source. Because if you ask me a question and I give you an answer, that's my opinion. But if you ask me a question and I say, here's this blog, or here's this white paper, here's this video, now it's kind of like the collective knowledge of humanity speaking on my behalf. And for whatever reason, people are just so much more likely to take that seriously, which on some levels is kind of sad, but we should definitely use to our advantage. I love that you have this resource. I've not heard of this before. Thank you. I'm going to go track these folks down and figure out who they are. This is excellent. Cool. So we've got our, I think we're making good time here. We've got our, oh, and if you're watching live and if you have any questions, we actually have a really solid group of live attendees. Please feel free to chime in. Oh, Karen just asked, actually, she said, you don't recommend having the survey anonymous. What a good question. I don't, well, I think you definitely could, but I feel like what you're really doing here is you're trying to get this specific person to take action, and you're trying to figure out if they haven't, why. And so an anonymous survey is going to make it difficult for you to help them towards their end goal. Even if their end goal isn't your school, the paradigm I always like to assume with anybody I'm talking to is, I'm going to help you no matter what, even if I'm not the right solution for you. It sounds like Sally's the same way. Yeah. And so what I like about a direct survey is I'm getting the context that I would need in order to serve you. And if I can't connect that to a person, then my ability to serve is gone. I think what you might do though is for everybody that you've lost. So in our admissions pipeline, we'll get there. And I actually, this is your idea, Karen, not mine. I think it's pretty brilliant. Anybody that we decide at the very end of our process, look, this is a lost lead, we're never going to close them. Maybe the process there is to send them an anonymous survey and say, hey, really appreciate the time that you invested. I know that it's costly to research schools. I understand that we weren't the right fit, no hard feelings. If you don't mind, we have an anonymous survey that we've provided. You'd be doing us an immense favor and giving us performance improvement opportunities, that type of thing. Would that work? Karen, got it. Cool. Awesome. And
Okay,
any other
so
questions, please lob those in. Yeah,
yeah, if
please.
you're going to send the survey back to us via email, how anonymous are they?
Right. Well, I think to make it anonymous, you'd have to like build a Google
Right. I
form.
mean, so at that one point, right after the tour, I think.
Oh yeah, it'd be pretty
Yeah.
easy to connect who's who.
Yeah.
Yeah, great point. Okay, cool. So we've got our new parent inquiry, tour schedule pending, tour complete. At the tour complete, we make sure that they know what they need to do. So it's probably the admissions packet, and then make sure that we have our post-tour survey. Now this is where the waters get really muddled. Every school is so different. So we have some schools that their admissions process, their application process is really multifaceted. How does it work for you, Sally? What is it? Just an application on the front end?
Right, it is.
Okay.
Application deposit. We don't interview children. I think that I don't understand sometimes because I think Montessori, we're here to work where the children are and take them. But for some schools, it's part of their process.
Mhm.
So pretty much it's just they come in, put their deposit down, and then we give them the enrollment information.
Excellent. So this aligns with what we've got here, which would be actual application submitted, and you've got your bullet points there. So it's a deposit submitted, documents filled out. One thing, and this goes right back to our tour issue, is it's really nerve-wracking for a parent to pay this money, fill out all this information, and then just sit and twiddle our thumbs.
Right.
It's a lot like, and forgive the dating analogy because sometimes it doesn't play very well, but after the first date when you're waiting for the other person to call, and if it takes them too long to call, you start telling yourself all the reasons that you didn't like them anyway. So I think that after the application is submitted, it can be really helpful to nurture them in other ways. And this, oh, go ahead.
No, I definitely agree, because I think that's a different kind of nurture campaign.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Absolutely. And I think that becomes very specific to your school. So it can be things like letting them know the decision-making process on your end. So, hey, just so you know, these are the factors that we look at. This is how, we're very limited in scope. And sometimes, if you have a waiting list, but then you can say things, if we choose to move forward, here's what you can expect. Here's what a classroom looks like. Here's what I really love a day in the life. I think that type of article is great. And then educating them about Montessori in general. And a note for everybody, because retention, especially around the kindergarten year, do you have a kindergarten program or an elementary program, excuse me?
Right. It's the 3 to 6 is all one together. So every year we have, a different number, but it's hard because, people are double paying with their property tax in the New York area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So everybody that we've ever talked to has a hard time retaining at the kindergarten year. Now is the time to plant the seed. And I know that sounds really weird, like they haven't even signed up, but if you can start telling parents the importance of a 3-year cycle, the importance of a multi-age classroom, the importance of a 3-year-old learning from like if we plant that seed right now today, because you can't plant that seed when they're 4.5. Mom and dad have already decided like, oh, I can save that money. But if you can plant that seed when they're, 2.5 going into the 3-year-old program, now's the time to start. And it's not just about the kindergarten year. It's just the time to start indoctrinating them into Montessori. And I won't use that word publicly, obviously, but, behind the scenes, we want them to know like, hey, first of all, this is a 100-year-old form of pedagogy built on the scientific method. And they need to know some of these most important things. And now is the time to begin sort of acclimating them to that process.
And I think it's good too with parents working so long. A lot of parent education, it's hard to get them out like we used to. And so I think this would also serve that parent education all along in little dribbles that they can digest. And then it's not waiting for once they start this school. They've got this information and they can start looking for the changes in their children. And then we can start saying, okay, how to implement this at home. So I think giving them this information before the child even starts will get them excited, but they'll also be able to know kind of what they're looking for. And they'll see kind of the success will feed into reinforcing what they can do at home and help booster the program itself.
Well, I love what you just said because, one of the marketer's mantra is to create good clients. There's a mentor of mine that I follow very closely. His name's Ryan Dice, and he said that you train your clients on how to treat you. And I felt that that's always been really true. And I think that's true for Montessori schools. Like you can train parents hey, this is the way that things work. This is the way we do things. And here's how you can help. And if a parent knows that and they know that up front, generally speaking, especially Montessori parents, I mean, these are, you know, not to spend too much time there, but these are folks that I think are compliant more often than not with this type of request. They're going to want to help. They're not going to go against the grain. Hopefully everybody agrees with me. Heidi has a question. Do you still recommend MailChimp? How do you set up email nurture? Is there a course in the resources section? I actually am going to be a little self-serving here. I recommend our CRM because it's the best. And I can show you how it works at the end of this call if we have time. If you don't use our CRM, then I do still recommend MailChimp, although MailChimp just changed their pricing. And God bless them, they were free for so long that you can't even blame them, but it's $15 a month now in order to have any level of automation. And there is a course in the Nido member section on setting up an email nurture. It's pretty easy. And I can show you how to do it in our CRM here in just a moment too. Awesome. So application submitted, we just talked about. Application accepted. Tell me about this process. Sally, how does this work?
We send them an email. It depends. We go year round now. And so usually it fits right in where the child comes in for a while, gets to know the staff, and then they come into the classroom. If they're waiting till September, there's a real void. I have to be honest.
No, that's helpful.
Yeah. And so it's really, they just kind of drop by, like you said.
Is your application and enrollment agreement the same thing?
Right, yes.
Okay, so, and a lot of schools are that way. I'm going to delete this phase then because it's not applicable. So application submitted, applications accepted, and it's basically done. And then what you just said is interesting. Let's add a stage called, what would we call that? The stage in between their application being accepted and them moving into intake. It's like the gap.
Yeah, it's, I don't know, almost like cricket time.
Cricket time. I'm just going to use that as a placeholder and then we'll make, that's really funny. Okay, so we're going to say cricket time. And I think this is where we go heavy into parent education. And honestly, this is where an email newsletter would come into play a lot. If you're a third or fourth play member, we write these for you. So we write one email newsletter for every week. And all you would need to do is add your prospects to your parent list so they start getting those emails. And then you have the opportunity to nurture them like their parents, and the emails are really robust. Do you send out a regular weekly newsletter, Sally?
No, we use Montessori Compass. I don't know if you've heard about that. It's lets us do our record keeping. It lets us do weekly, or you can do daily or weekly or monthly reports to the parents. And so we do it that way because a newsletter to me is so hard in Montessori because every child, it's not tailored to a child. So this way, every Friday they get a report and the teachers will write something, just something kind of homey and warm, specific to their child. And then just a couple of the lessons that the child has done during the week. And we've really, since we've done this, our retention is fantastic. We don't lose them anymore because it's not a black box, and it really makes it personable. We just don't really do pictures.
I don't think I've heard of another school that sends out a weekly email specific to the student. That's really stellar. Good for you. I can absolutely see how your retention would be improved. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's all set up. It's a very easy thing to do. And the observations, and it keeps our record keeping too for the lessons giving and what stage it's in. So it's all there in one thing for the teachers.
That's excellent. So we'll go back to cricket time. I think that's an excellent pro tip, by the way, but what's something that we can do for your school so that this phase is well serviced so people aren't falling off for cricket time? And maybe that's just creating a new longer term nurture where they get an email once.
I think so. Okay. I think like you said, that maybe a little more education, even like why we're character free, why, how that ties into something. So they don't think it's I think parents, as soon as they want to ask us something about this school, as soon as you give them the reason, they are so happy to comply, as long as it's just not an arbitrary rule. So I think sometimes setting up some of the routines might be good too. Why are you character free? Why are you, why do you bring the backpacks one day a week, instead of bringing homework every day? And
Mm.
and so when those little things specific to the school might help as well. And then with maybe some more broader aspects of what they can expect, as like a typical child going through Montessori, focus on here's a big one on the East Coast. Parents want a pull-out program every day of the week. And I have to educate them about the work cycle and developing focus.
Mm.
And so I think, a lot of schools use executive functioning and spiral curriculum, but Montessori's kind of been doing this for 100 years. And to take these terms that they're hearing other schools, I don't hate to say Johnny come lately, but spouting because they're now in the lexicon, and bring it back to where did these things really develop and who saw the potential in these things. I think that would also reinforce their commitment to the school.
That's brilliant. And you mentioned something about the child experience. I think you should share that thing that you do weekly. Maybe even have an example, like here's something that goes out with sensitive information blurred out. But
that's a good idea.
As a parent, if I saw that, I mean, sold. Like I get a custom report from my kid I'm going to go talk to my school right now and tell them, hey, y'all, you're falling behind.
Yeah. So I should actually do that up, not at the admissions, but up before.
I'd have that on your website in the about, under your unique value proposition. I think that that's so big and so important. I think that that's really cool. Cool. So we've got our cricket time is long-term nurture. Here's the thing about email nurturers is they're a pain in the hindquarters to build, but once you have them forever. So it's the most leverageable asset in existence. So, it's worth investing the time. And you actually, I think, can leverage your resources if, there's 4 people in the office and you make everybody write 3 emails. There's 12 emails. That's 12 weeks. So, we now have 12 weeks worth of really viable content. That's 3 months. You just got through cricket time. And what's kind of cool is if you make it fun and collaborative, then, people are kind of sparring back and forth to see who can make the most, fun or interesting or et cetera emails. And if you're letting those emails be sent from the people that wrote them, you're also giving the parents the opportunity to kind of learn who these folks are. So now it's like, hey, I'm Bridget. I'm the assistant here. And let me tell you what I first learned. And, that type of thing I think would be fun.
Or parents, right?
Yes. Yeah, if they would do it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you could get an email out of a parent, man, I never thought about that, Sally. That is brilliant. If you could get an email out of a parent, let me tell you about my experience. That is so, so smart. I'm stealing that from you. I'm writing this down.
Thank you.
Email nurtures from parents. Wow, what a fun ask. Like, hey, parents, if you wouldn't mind, write us a 300-word email on your experience with our school. And then enter to win a prize, of course, because people like that. I think that's so smart. Great idea. So next phase is what we call intake, but you might call it, I know, maybe I'll stop and ask. Once they start, I know there's a period where you're kind of doing the initial intake. What do you call that period?
Phase in.
Phase in. Awesome. And then the phase in period, what are the steps that you take for the phase in period?
Well, if it's the school year, we'll have like a parent night. We'll have, we have a picnic before so the new parents can meet the old parents.
Oh, that's so smart.
We have them come in and meet the staff like after hours, and then we'll have the child. And so the parents are in the classroom with us in the environment, and they see that the parents are comfortable with us to establish that emotional bridge between school and home. And then we have the parent come with the child just for maybe 15 minutes, if this is when the classroom's operating, and have the parent in the office and have the child in the classroom, kind of just, that helps the parent see that the child is naturally driven to use some of these materials. And then it's emails during the first couple of days, just letting you know he was, we know he was upset when he came in, but he's fine and he's playing. And maybe this is where I'll send a picture or two so the parent can see.
I love that. Yeah, Matt at his school sends one picture every day for the first 7 days.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
And he says it makes a huge difference. And
That's
really,
good.
it's he says the parents are more a problem than the children are. You know, like mom misses the kid, and then she convinces herself
That's
that,
true.
oh no, he's just not ready, and brings him back in. So it's helpful.
Yeah. But don't you think that the parents might start to expect that, or you just set it up front?
I think he sets the expectation that you get we
Yeah.
send one picture every day for the first 7 days. And that's another thing. So I was actually going to end the call with this, but it's a good place for us to put it now. I believe very strongly that this process should be documented visually and that we should hand this to parents in the very beginning. By the way, we have, and these are the words I like to use, we have a proven process. We have a proven admissions process, and this is it. So first you make your inquiry, obviously we schedule a tour once the tour is complete, and you're actually just showing them, this is the way my sales process works. But for a parent to be able to see this and to know like, oh my goodness, and then everything you said with the phase in, again, that's a huge selling point to me. The fact that you have a picnic where I get to go meet all the other parents, like has to be on your website somewhere. I have to know that because it's so important and compelling. I would just love, I love the idea that you get to build a community with people that way. Like, I think that that's brilliant that you do. And if you're not shouting that from the rooftops, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. You do so many really cool things, Sally. I really applaud
No,
you.
thank
It's
you.
amazing.
I just feel like one of those hamsters on the wheel, trying to keep my forward momentum, and I'm just tired.
Oh, I think you're crushing it. Well, I think we're all that way. And I'm an epic hypocrite. I mean, it's, my job is to sit here and spouse advice to everybody. But, if you look behind the scenes, like my website's slower than most of our schools and we have our own problems. It's the cobbler's shoes, isn't it?
Right.
Okay. So after phase in, now closed doesn't mean that we're done. It means that this set of processes is closed. So this is closed enrolled, meaning we won. Closed lost, meaning we lost the client, and they can move from any one of these phases into closed lost. And this, to Karen's point, could be when we have our anonymous form. And then I just want to show you the way that this is going to work. So my big surprise for you is, and you don't have to use it if you don't want to, I don't want to make it cumbersome, but I'm going to gift you with this software.
Oh,
So this is our Montessori CRM. It's available to second plane members in the manifestation you see here. Normally that would be $100 a month. So this is $12,000 a year, or excuse me, $1,200 worth a year worth the value. And we're going to give it to you for being a hot seat member. So thank you so much.
thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you.
Fantastic for a school like ours.
And then this is the way, we'll just say the Oslam family. So let's say that I was a family in your pipeline. What's cool about the way the pipeline works is a new parent inquiry looks like this, and you can take notes. So you can say, if our admissions is $1,000 a month, just using round numbers, and who your admissions director is, you can assign it to them. And this will show you the value that's currently in your pipeline. So if you go to your dashboard, you can actually see that value, and you can see what stage that they're in. And then it's drag and drop. So you can say, oh, they just scheduled a tour, and then drag and drop them. And oh, the tour's complete, and then drag and drop. And what's nice about this is this visual gives you the opportunity to track people through the process. So you just have a real quick at a glance. And then you can communicate with families directly from this application. So I don't have an email loaded up. Let me load up my email real quick. Once the email is loaded up, then you can send an email to this prospect directly from the app, which is nice because you get to see all the communication that happened inside of Here Nested. And then you mentioned that you wanted to use Calendly or something similar. We actually have an online scheduler that you can use here too. So anybody who schedules with you, anybody who fills out a form, they'll all automatically drop into your CRM.
Oh, nice. Yeah, so it's all in one place.
It's all in one place. Yes, ma'am. And then to Heidi's request, the email nurture lives inside of the campaigns, and you can see it here. So I have them going out once every minute just so it's easy for me to test, but you could set this, once every day, once every 12 days, whatever. And then we have 7 emails and a call, but we can customize this to your heart's content. Yeah, and what we just did now is we just built your admissions pipeline. But what's cool about this system is you have an unlimited number of pipelines. So my strong recommendation, and this isn't system specific, this is for everybody. You need another pipeline. So if you have, I think we need a pipeline per program. So we're going to have our infant program, our preschool program, infant toddler primary. And now we can track people through each of the programs. And so because there's 3-year cycles, we could have, it could just be split up into 3 sections or, 3 sections per year or whatever. But knowing where people are in that phase and then building automation per phase, I think could help us ultimately automate the entire admissions and enrollment process at a Montessori school, which is possible with a system like this, but it's also possible just using MailChimp if you want to roll up your sleeves. But again, we can't automate anything and we can't build systems around anything unless we actually put pen to paper the way we just did on this call. So I'd encourage everybody to do that. And Sally, I'm going to send you some tutorial videos that we have on this system so you know exactly how to use it.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Karen's asking, is that an internal marketing piece to ensure you don't lose students between levels? Yes. So I think we always need to tell parents where they're going next. And something that Heidi and I have been working on, actually, I wish I could find it right now. It's going to take me too long. But Heidi was the catalyst for this, and I just loved it. We want a life cycle image. Oh yeah, I found it. We want parents to know that there's a plan. Can you see the Montessori life cycle image? Is my screen showing?
Yes.
So the idea would be that we tell parents like, hey, you're here. And this is, and I mean, the verbiage here can change. I really like it, but I mean, everybody has their own paradigm and approach. You're here, we're in exploration. And the next phase is grace and courtesy. And now we get to speak to why that's so important. And the reason this is critical is because people don't like to not finish processes. They don't like, I mean, one of the and this comes from Don Miller, but one of the most cruel things you can do to somebody is run up and say, knock, knock. And after they say, who's there, just walk away and not tell them anything. Because there's something psychological about needing to check off all the boxes and tell a story all the way to completion. And so if we can tell the parents, like, this isn't daycare. You're not just dropping your kids off to be safe. Right. We have a proven process, going back to that whole narrative, that is going to prepare your children for life. And here's every stage. And if they know looking forward that there's a subsequent stage and what that stage is, then they're going to be more likely to retain. So if retention is an issue for any of your schools, for those listening, this is the way to handle retention, is to let people know what the next stage is. You want them to actually be telling other parents like, oh no, we're about to get to the self-mastery stage. And at that stage, this happens. And that's when we move into parent advocacy, where your parents are actually telling your narrative on your behalf. And I think the way to do this is this. I'd be really interested in your feedback on this, Sally.
Yeah, but where it says primary early childhood, I might actually put the years so that they see that it's the 3-year cycle.
Brilliant. Yeah, I'm going to make a note for myself to do that right now. I love that idea. And I actually want to include, we've got 2 of these, but I want to include these graphics on content so that when you ship out a piece of content, a parent knows like, oh, this belongs to our self-mastery cycle. That way they kind of start to, you could just have it up in the top right-hand corner with, like this part highlighted. So you can see at this phase, we do this thing. Let me write down what you just said before I forget. Add years to Montessori cycle. Awesome. We just hit the hour mark. That was a great call. I really appreciate you doing this for us, Sally. Thank you so much.
Oh,
do you have any feedback for me?
Excuse me?
Do you have any feedback for me? How did this go?
No, it was wonderful. It really put everything, to me, it's just, I know I need to do this stuff, but it's just so abstract. I mean, and this is fantastic. I think this, especially the drag and drop, I've seen other marketing things, but it's so, you've got to, delete them here, put them in here. This is really user-friendly.
I'm glad you like it. I'd love from our live attendees, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, confessions, please feel free to voice them. Heidi just said, really terrific call, taking notes throughout. Great stuff. Thank you, Heidi. So glad to have you here, as always. Yeah, really appreciate everybody. We do this every Thursday, 10:30 a.m. Pacific, 1:30 p.m. Eastern. And next week's call, what is next week's call about? I should know this. We just finished the admissions pipeline. And so I'm looking it up. Next week, we're talking about establishing thought leadership. And we actually have Mary Lou Cobb coming in as a guest, who's brilliant and pseudo-famous in the Montessori world. So I'm really excited to have her. Sally, let's you and I stay connected on this. I'd be happy to help you.
Thank you. Yeah.
And I'm going to send you all the assets that I promised you, along with some tutorials to go through. Yeah, and that's all I have. Thank you so much for being here.
I appreciate it. It's really I feel wonderful. I feel supported. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm glad. Well, thank you so much for being a member. You said you've been a member for a year, right? That's a big deal. Yeah. Yeah, I'm
Very-
glad I've had you.
Thank you.
Awesome. And to our live attendees, thank you so much for coming. You changed the whole narrative for us. You just add so much to the conversation. So if you're watching the recording, thank you for doing so. But you know, you can always show up live. Just go to ninomarketing.com/coaching, and we'll talk to y'all next time.